the overconfidence, the hubris of the administration going into Iran without any immediate intelligence preparation and relying on target lists that we've been formulating for decades. You saw what that brings. Overconfidence is as close as you can get to a guarantee of defeat.
Ralph Peters is a retired officer, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, where he focused on intelligence and intelligence gathering. He's also a best-selling novelist and the author of innovative works on strategy and security. He's the author of 34 published books at the moment, and probably he's working on another one right now. Ralph's most recent column, which has been published by the Hoover Institution, is the too much winning syndrome. And one of the things that he points out here is whether in strategic affairs or our personal lives, the occasional setback can be a blessing. Are you suggesting, before we start, I just want to remember to urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Michael Medved Official. Ralph, talking about winning too much, are you suggesting that the early news in this war may have trapped Trump and Hegseth and the rest of the policymakers into a dangerous channel?
Well, I think they were already in multiple dangerous channels, Michael. And I think though it was something of a misfortune for Trump to have these early, easy rolling military successes, grabbing Maduro, pulling him out of the country, virtually no cost except the fuel. And then you have, of course, the attacks on the drug boats, if they are indeed drug boats. And there was a sense, I think, the administration that our military can do anything you tell it to, so why not do it? And of course, Trump holds grudges a very long time. And for some reason, I do not know what it is, he's had a grudge against Iran. And I have no sympathy with the Iranians. I don't mind the fact that their old leadership is now gone. But that said, Michael, you know very well, you gotta pick your time and your place. You gotta pick them carefully. And I think the overconfidence, the hubris of the administration going into Iran without any immediate intelligence preparation, just doing it and relying on target lists that we've been formulating for decades. You saw what that brings. At any rate, overconfidence is as close as you can get to a guarantee of defeat. Now, I'm not suggesting the Iranians are going to defeat us in the battlefield, but right now I can tell you, the Iranians took the lessons of Iraq, of Afghanistan, to mean that you can wear the Americans out. You can outlast them. It may be hard, it may be painful, but you can outlast them. And they're determined to outlast us. They're not going to cave. And also, if I may just continue for one more thought, I've been arguing this for 30 years, or almost 40, that when you face an enemy motivated by passionate religion, I don't care what it is, it's really a tougher opponent, because Trump's a transactional guy. But you can't do that with the religious guys because, first of all, they'll cling to the fight forever. And even if they think at some point they need breathing space, they'll make a temporary agreement, but they don't feel honored. They don't feel obliged to honor the agreement with the infidel, etc. And so we just went through multiple decades of warfare against religiously motivated enemies, and we still, after Iraq and Afghanistan, cannot admit that our enemies are motivated. Say, oh, the Iranians, well, the Revolutionary Guards were all corrupt. Well, corruption and religion have gone hand in hand since the dawn of time, as near as I can tell. There's no problem there. But what really matters, Michael, is you got to study your opponent. Credit him or her with free will, with a vision of their own.
Are you saying that there was not an anticipation that the desperate Iranians would try to close the Strait of Hormuz, would try to interfere with international oil traffic?
Well, I think it's crazy that we weren't prepared for that. We were not prepared for this Iran adventure. Call it what you will, war or not. I call it a war.
Excursion. Excursion is the word they're using now.
Yeah, we're on the get on the tour bus, right? Um, count the heads. But no, they weren't prepared. They were convinced it was going to be easy. The Iranians would fold, but the Iranians are dogmatic and intensely committed to their religious vision and their vision of where they fit in the Middle East and the world. Trump and poor Hegseth, God help him, that guy is so far out of his depth. He's a mouse trying to swim the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, well, okay, which is a great image, but not an encouraging one. If you were called by President Trump or by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and they were said, Ralph Peters, you're a very experienced intelligence officer. You know the Middle East, you know Iran, you know the whole world. What do we do next to set this right, to open the Straits of Hormuz? Is there a military answer or a diplomatic answer, economic answer? What? What do we do?
There is no answer. There's no good answer. Diplomacy isn't going to work. The military, if you're willing to make the commitment for years and years and end with hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops, well, then we can open the Straits of Hormuz and keep them open, except for the occasional random sneak attack. But in the real world, we launched into this without preparation, without forethought, on a whim, making a global conflagration, economic at least, if not yet military, um, as we have done in short order. Is stunning to me, but to not be prepared, the military rule, Michael, is you always worst case it. You may hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. And you look at alternatives, we call them branches and sequels. Well, if A happens, is B going to happen or could it go right to X? What are the alternatives? They didn't war game it. They didn't do any of it. They just launched in, sure that the Iranians will fold. Well, guess what? To use the cliche, the accurate cliche, the enemy gets a vote. And the Iranians are not going to fold immediately because they're convinced that they can outlast us. That's simple.
Okay, so what happened to the idea that there were 30,000 people who were murdered by the regime, that the regime had only 10% or maybe 20% support, that the regime was ready to fold? Do you believe that was the sincere conviction of President Trump and his advisors?
Yeah, I do believe that they convinced themselves that the Iranians were ready to fold. But remember, the one slight chance they had would have been going in earlier to actually support those demonstrators who were slaughtered. They didn't do that. Look, they are in so deep that there's no easy, no medium easy, not even a difficult way to get out of this with any dignity. And this may be yet another defeat for the United States of America. The most powerful military in the world is not much use if it's not led by a brain.
And we will talk about more concerning what Ralph Peters calls the too much winning syndrome. What's fascinating about this is that President Trump foresaw that. He predicted when he was running for president in 2016 that we're going to be winning so much that the American people are going to get tired of winning. I don't think there are many people who are tired of winning right now, but they are certainly tired of the war. What do you do to build support for a successful conclusion to this war? That and more coming up with Ralph Peters right here on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, a pleasure and an honor to welcome back to the show Ralph Peters, prolific author and retired U.S. Army officer who has served all over the world and has written about the dangers of Iran to our country. And you actually have been writing about that for 40 years, haven't you, Ralph?
Yeah, I've lived through multiple crises. The good part about having that you and I have both been through multiple crises is you get to a point where you don't panic. You might get angry, you might be concerned, but you don't panic because, to use your old German expression, "Die Lage war immer so ernst." The sky was always falling. There's always been a crisis. Certainly in the days of our youth, there were plenty. But right now, this peculiar self-inflicted wound of a crisis created on a whim by an American president, affecting the entire world economy, affecting our allies who were blindsided, uh, betraying alliances, doing foolish, utterly foolish things, misusing our military, and bragging about it. Michael, I'm stunned.
So is there anything that this administration could do now to try to rebuild public support for this war? Because according to the polling, two-thirds of Americans at least disapprove of the war and the way it's being conducted.
Yeah. And let me be very clear, Michael. I have no sympathy with the Iranian regime. The leaders who were killed, fine, all for it. My problem is that you have to do what we call prepare the battlefield in a global sense. You have to get your allies ready. You have to study the problem. You have to war game it. You don't put our troops in danger frivolously. Um, and this administration checked every block of how to get it wrong. They don't know the enemy they're fighting. They had targets, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much hardware you've got. What matters is, do you understand your enemy and his strengths and vulnerabilities? The Iranians have a better understanding of Donald Trump than he has of the Iranians. And that's an enormous advantage for the Iranians. No matter how many Iranians we kill, no matter how many drones we destroy and missiles we shoot down, if they have a better grip on our weaknesses than we have on theirs, they can certainly outlast us. I mean, how many Americans want to hear that we're going to go back to the Middle Eastern state for another 10 or 20 years? Iran is a powerful, big country. Despite its minority problems, it's more unified than Iraq. Um, this is a tar baby you don't want any part of. And if nothing else, at least the administration should have finished the business at hand. You don't start one war while you're dealing with multiple conflicts around the world. I mean, man, this is going to be the textbook example for future historians of how to do something absolutely wrong and utterly stupid.
Okay, when you talk about that, I, dare I ask you, what do you say about the recent conversation from the president and from the Secretary of War about Cuba and about a new effort to push out the Cuban regime that's been around even longer than the Iranians? Is that a likely means of turning attention away from the disappointing outcome in Iraq, in Iran?
I'm starting to wonder if maybe Jeffrey Epstein has a hidden ranch in Cuba. Um, yeah, no, Cuba would have been a much wiser target long term, not for violent overthrow, but that could be. We could have dealt with that over the next 3 years. We could have helped the Cuban people. We could have at least made sure they were fed and had some medicine. But instead, we're off in Iran in an unnecessary conflict. And the idea that Iran was 2 weeks away from a usable nuclear weapon. Well, I've been hearing that for almost a half century now, and the argument doesn't work. The Iranians weren't even close. So I don't know, Michael. It's so hard to see my country perverted like this, to put the military at risk for something that's just immeasurably stupid. I go back to the word stupid. How often do you use that word in foreign policy matters? You don't, but this is stupid.
Okay, so given the fact that here we are right now with the price of oil skyrocketing, with potentially devastating impacts on the world economy, um, how do we bring this to any kind of acceptable, let alone successful conclusion?
Michael, I have no answer. I've usually got an opinion, at least, of everything, but there is no good way to get out of this. This briar patch is full of poison thorns, and God knows, I wish we could snap our fingers in, or just get in a time machine and go back 2 weeks and not do it. But and to be fair, um, we don't know what the future holds. Something there might be a coup in Iran that we didn't expect. There may be divisions, but you can't count on getting lucky on a black swan event for the Iranians. You've got to play in the real world. And the real world means you study your enemy, you set realistic goals. In fact, I have another piece coming out for Hoover. It might even be out today. That says when you're dealing with strategy, with a strategic problem that potentially involves sending the military to do X, Y, or Z, there's a very simple test for whether it's viable or not. 3 questions. If you can't answer these 3 questions in single sentences that the average American voter can understand, don't do it. Question 1 is, what precisely do we mean to achieve? Not generalities. What exactly do we want this mission to achieve? The second, can it be done? Could a realistic expert in the field agree that this is doable? 3, if it is doable, is doing it likely to be worth the cost? And we
Those
didn't
are
have,
3 profound questions, and again, I know where you're going in terms of the answer. What about the impact of this war on Vladimir Putin? You have written prolifically about Putin. You understand him. You know him. Is he have a chance of being the overwhelming winner of this confrontation?
at the extreme possibility, you might even might be seeing Putin playing the role Trump likes to cast himself in as a peacemaker. Because, well, the first thing is Iran was a vital ally for Russia. So the first news for Vladimir Putin was bad. But now, how quickly things change. 2 weeks later, Trump has just rescinded the ban on oil exports from Russia. And right now, Putin was hurting. He's hurting. His economy's hurting at last, really hurting. And suddenly we're selling, okay, the Russians can sell their oil for now. Man, what, Dumb and Dumber? Well, pick your analogy. And again, let me say something else, though, to be fair and show that, I'll take reality as I find it. Pete Hegseth is wildly out of his depth, but he was right about one thing in general terms, that the military had become very politically correct. Not to the extreme he claimed, but nonetheless, there were aspects of it that needed a little bit of cleanup. But there's a big difference between holding the line against excessive political correctness and invading a major country without a plan. So,
And those are matters that are brought up in the new piece, To the Too Much Winning Syndrome by Ralph Peters, along with material on his other books and columns. It's posted at our website at michaelmedved.com. The info about his fascinating books, and including his priceless series about the Civil War in the United States, which, by the way, can teach a great many lessons to today's policymakers. Ralph, let us hope for a successful weekend for our forces and for some kind of remarkable and maybe unexpected deliverance from the difficulties that we're all experiencing.